He was once a father who abandoned his family, living only in drunken nights and regret. But one day, he decided to change, to start over. This is the story of a man once lost, now finding his way back to being the father his son always needed. But can he heal the deep wounds within his family? Join us in following this emotional and challenging journey of a father. Don't miss the moments that will keep you hooked, and who knows, you might discover important values in life that you've been searching for. If you enjoy inspiring stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a video. Share this video with those you think might need to hear this story, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Autumn, a season of transition, a time when dreams and hopes fade away. The yellow leaves gently fall, blending into the cold flow of time. Ethan Carter sat silently in the worn, fabric-upholstered chair on the train ride back home, staring out of the window, but seeing nothing but the passing scenery, blurred, distant, unfamiliar. A lifetime seemed buried in the muddy puddles of mistakes, sorrow, and guilt. Those years, the time when Ethan once thought he would become the perfect man, were now nothing but faint, flickering lights. He had once had it all: a stable job, a loving wife, and a son he imagined would play with him, would look at the world alongside him. But those dreams shattered the moment he first sipped from the bottle, and little by little, alcohol took everything away. His son Lucas Carter was now grown, but Ethan had never truly been a father to him. Sarah, his ex-wife, was now a single mother, struggling to raise Lucas, taking care of their son alone. Ethan only occasionally called Sarah, but never dared to ask about Lucas, never dared to face him, to look into his eyes. He had abandoned them, abandoned everything that mattered most in his life. For one thing, alcohol. But today, for the first time in many years of running away, Ethan sat on this train with only one hope: to see his son again. He knew that he might never be able to make up for the losses, but he couldn't continue to live in the darkness, watching life slip away without doing anything. The train kept moving, the scenery outside the window gradually fading into the twilight. Ethan sighed, wondering if he could muster the courage to face Sarah, the woman he had hurt, and whether Lucas would recognize that he was no longer the man of alcohol, but the father the boy deserved. He didn't know. He only knew that if he didn't step forward, if he didn't face all the mistakes of his past, he would never have the chance to fix them. And with every hesitant moment, he understood that this was the only opportunity he had. A cold breeze blew through the window, a reminder of the coldness in his heart, the heart that had long forgotten the warmth of family, of love. But Ethan could not turn back, could not retreat. This was the final train, the train that would take him back to his family, back to himself. Ethan clearly remembered the days of the past. He once had it all: a complete family, a loving wife, and an adorable son. The day Lucas was born was the happiest day of his life. The hospital, the delivery room, the soft light casting down on his newborn child's fragile skin. During that moment, Ethan felt certain that he would be a great father. He would teach Lucas how to play baseball, take him fishing, be the role model he needed throughout his life. Sarah, his wife, looked at him with eyes full of love as they gazed at their firstborn Lucas. Ethan could see everything in her eyes: trust, hope, and boundless love. They had built a home filled with things they thought would never be lacking: love, family, career. But everything slowly fell apart when Ethan began to escape into alcohol. Just one drink, then two, then many more. It started as a way to relieve stress from work and minor life troubles, but soon alcohol became the only tranquilizer for his soul. He sought an escape in it, but ultimately it dragged him deeper into the abyss of loss of control. It didn't take long, but it was enough to change everything. Sarah couldn't continue living with this man. She looked at Ethan with disappointment, with pain he never fully understood. When she said goodbye, Ethan could only remain silent, unable to speak, because he knew he deserved everything that was happening. But he couldn't stop drinking. He couldn't stop neglecting his family. He couldn't stop running away. Lucas, the little boy at the time, could only look at his father with innocent eyes, not knowing why his father had disappeared, why he no longer stayed by his side. Ethan never dared to acknowledge his son's suffering, let alone face Sarah, who had to bear it all alone. In the long nights when the drunken haze cleared, Ethan would feel regret. But that regret only lasted for a few hours, swallowed once again by the craving for more alcohol. Now, sitting in the chair on the train, Sarah's words echoed in his mind. "He needs you, Ethan. You're Lucas's father, but you abandoned him. You can't keep living like this." Those words swirled endlessly in his head like an infinite loop. The only thing he could do now was torment himself, but a part of him longed for the chance to start over. Now, after all these years, Ethan realized something. Not everything could be saved, but there was one thing he could still hold on to: an opportunity to restart his life, a chance to become the father Lucas deserved. He had wasted too much time, but now he couldn't go back. He couldn't let the mistakes of the past control his life anymore. Ethan sighed and looked out the window. The train continued its journey, but it wasn't like the ones he had traveled on before, the ones he had missed, the ones he had deliberately let slip through his fingers. He couldn't change the past, couldn't fix the mistakes that had been made, but he could still change the future. And today, this train ride was the only opportunity he had. As the train left the station, Ethan felt a surge of loneliness in his chest. Everything outside passed by in a blur like his own life. He couldn't forget those painful days when alcohol consumed his mind, when Sarah's loving words were nothing but whispers in his memory. But now, one question haunted him. Could those lost years ever be made up for? Sarah had been an incredible wife, always there for him during tough times. They had overcome so many challenges together, from raising a young child to the daily struggles of life. But when Lucas was born, everything seemed to change. Ethan couldn't be the father his son needed. He couldn't stand firm in the family. He couldn't withstand the temptations of life. It only took a short time for Sarah to see that. "You can't keep doing this, Ethan," she had said to him. Her eyes filled with tears she could do nothing about. "He needs you, but you're not there. All you have is the alcohol." Her words echoed in Ethan's mind, and he knew that he was the one who had destroyed everything. He had abandoned them when Lucas needed him most, left when his family needed the stability of a father. The drinking had begun during those weary evenings when work became stressful and life's problems clung to him. To escape, he turned to alcohol. At first it was just one drink, then two, then more. Alcohol slowly became the only way he could numb the pain in his heart, the guilt he could never share with anyone. But then he realized that he wasn't just drunk from alcohol, but from his own avoidance. He was running away from everything. It was also for this reason that he couldn't see himself in Lucas's eyes every time he looked at a picture of his son. Lucas was growing up, but he didn't know how his son had changed. He didn't know if Lucas would recognize him or if the boy would remember the father who abandoned him when he was too young. During the sleepless nights when the drunkenness started to wear off, Ethan would ask himself if he could start over, if he could become the father Lucas needed. But the answer was always no, at least until now. But now, with this train ride with a tiny glimmer of hope, Ethan didn't know what to do anymore. He had missed so many opportunities to turn things around, to fix his mistakes. But this train ride was his only chance. If he didn't act, if he didn't face Sarah, face Lucas, he would be left with regret for the rest of his life. The feeling of guilt was something he couldn't shake off. But Ethan knew he had to face it. He had to fix everything, start again from somewhere, even if it was just a small step. Because if he didn't, he wouldn't be himself anymore. Old moments flashed through his mind, Lucas's laughter, Sarah's gaze, as she urged him to stop. All of these things had embedded deeply into his heart, and now they reappeared as distant calls. The train continued to move, and with each mile, Ethan felt a little bit of hope, a little bit of new strength. He knew he couldn't change the past, but at least he could start changing himself. Ethan stepped off the train, his legs heavy, as if every step he took brought him closer to a challenge he wasn't sure he had the strength to overcome. He knew he couldn't stop, but at the same time, he couldn't ignore the fear creeping into his mind. As he arrived at the station, memories long faded came rushing back to life, vivid as if they had just happened. Sarah's house hadn't changed much, but it still felt like a closed door, a part of his past that he had tried to forget. He stood there for a moment, staring at the house, feeling like a ghost standing outside their lives. After a few minutes of hesitation, he called John Miller. They had once been close friends, brothers in arms through difficult years. However, they had lost contact after Ethan fell into the spiral of alcohol. John was the only one he could turn to now, though he couldn't shake the feeling of shame. The phone rang for a while, and then a familiar voice answered. "Ethan, is that you? It's great to hear from you. I just heard you were coming back." Ethan smiled weakly. "Yeah, I'm back. Actually, I don't know where to begin." John didn't respond immediately, probably taking a moment to think. Then he spoke, his voice deep and firm. "I had a feeling you'd come back one day, Ethan. But you need to know you can't keep running away forever. You have to do something. You need to face the things you've been avoiding." Ethan sighed. "I know, but it's so hard, John. I don't know if I can start over." "Nothing's easy, but if you don't do something, you'll lose everything. You can be Lucas's father. You can be the man Sarah needs, but you have to act now. I know you can do it." John's words hit Ethan like a splash of cold water, but they also reached a part of him he had been hiding, a part he had forgotten while seeking escape in alcohol. "All right, I'll come meet you. Let's meet at the old bar tonight," John suggested. Ethan had no reason to refuse. The bar they used to frequent, where many drunken nights had passed, was also the place where they shared hopeful conversations before he lost everything. That evening, when Ethan entered the bar, the atmosphere was unchanged. The familiar smell of alcohol still hung in the air, but this time it no longer tempted him. He found John sitting in their usual corner, a beer beside him, but the air around him was different. No longer just a friend who sought refuge in alcohol. John was now a man with a family, with responsibilities. He looked at Ethan with eyes that were both worried and hopeful. "Ethan, I've heard a lot about the battles you've been facing. You need to stay sober. You need to stop," John began, but this time his voice wasn't soft. "You need to change, not just for you, but for your son. Lucas needs a father. Sarah needs you." Ethan looked into John's eyes, seeing sincerity in them that he had never received from anyone during the years he was consumed by alcohol. He knew John couldn't do it for him, but at least he had opened a path for him to walk a path, to find himself again. "Thanks, John. I don't know what I'd do without you, but I'm scared. If I don't do something now, it will be too late. There will be no more chances." "It's never too late, Ethan. You just need to take that first step, and then you'll see the path more clearly. I won't leave you." Once again, John's words echoed as a reminder that even though Ethan had lost his way, he could still find the light if he dared to step forward. A few days later, Dimitri, another friend of Ethan's, called him. Dimitri was someone he hadn't seen in a while, but he was always there when Ethan needed him. Dimitri understood better than anyone the pain Ethan had gone through, and he had always stood firm in the darkest of times. "Ethan, you can't keep living like this. I know you can change, but you need to decide now. You need to come back, not just for Lucas, but for yourself." His words weren't persuasion. They were a powerful reminder, like the call of his conscience. You need to seek help, Ethan. You need to go somewhere to recover and start fresh. Ethan knew he had to act. He had prepared himself, but there was one last thing He hadn't faced yet Sarah. But he knew that if he didn't do this, he would never be the father Lucas needed. After the call with Dimitri, Ethan felt a flame rise in his chest, even if it was just a small one. He couldn't let things continue like this, couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. He needed to change, needed to face everything he had been avoiding all this time. But there was one last thing he hadn't dared do, face Sarah, the one he had hurt the most. And more importantly, he had to face Lucas, his son, the boy he had abandoned when he was too young. The final train had brought Ethan back home. He stood in front of Sarah's house, his heart full of anxiety and confusion. The door, the house, everything felt like a painful memory he had left behind. But today, he couldn't just stand outside and run away anymore. He knocked on the door. A second later, Sarah opened it. She wasn't the woman he once knew, but there was still something familiar in her gaze, something of pity and something of doubt. "You're back," Sarah said, her voice not too cold, but with no warmth. "I thought you would never come back." Ethan swallowed, trying to find the right words, but all he had was silence and a feeling of overwhelming guilt. "Sarah, I know I was wrong. I know I abandoned you and Lucas. I have no excuse, but I want to say that I deeply regret it." Sarah didn't answer immediately, standing there looking at him for a long while. Ethan could feel the confusion in her eyes, the inner struggle between the past and the present. "You don't know how long it's been. I've had to do everything on my own. Lucas, he—" Sarah paused, her eyes suddenly welling up. "He needs you, Ethan. I've kept everything together for Lucas, but I can't do this for you." Her words hit Ethan like a knife to the heart. He felt the emptiness inside him grow wider. He had no right to hurt her more, nor did he have the right to let Lucas grow up without a father beside him. "You're right," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I abandoned you and our son. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be the father Lucas needs now." Sarah looked at him, her gaze softening slightly but still full of caution. "Are you sure? Sure you won't give up again?" Ethan nodded, trying to hold his gaze steady. "I'll do anything to change Sarah. I don't want to live like this anymore." A long silence hung between them, but finally Sarah sighed. "If you really want to change, I'll give you a chance. But don't disappoint me again." She stepped aside, as if allowing him to enter the house he had abandoned for so long. Ethan said nothing more, stepping across the threshold, feeling the warmth of a family he had once been so close to, but now felt so distant. Inside, Lucas's eyes met his immediately. The boy was sitting in the corner of the room with wide, curious eyes, staring at Ethan as if trying to recognize the man in front of him. Ethan's heart tightened. He had missed too many moments, too many of Lucas's first steps, and now all he had left was the pain of not being able to change what had passed. Lucas Ethan called, his voice trembling. "It's Dad." Those words were hard to say. How long had it been since he had called his son Dad? Each time he said it, It felt like speaking to a stranger. Lucas didn't say anything, but he stood up and walked over, his bright eyes full of curiosity. Ethan could only stand still, unable to do anything but look at his son, a part of him that he had missed for so long. Sarah stepped closer, watching both of them. Lucas doesn't say much, but he really likes having you here. After all, he's always waited. Sarah's words were like a glimmer of light in the darkness. Ethan felt all the emotions he had buried for so many years rise up strongly. He could feel a second chance, a chance to prove that he could do better, a chance to become Lucas's real father. Finally, no words could fully express the feeling in Ethan's heart at that moment. He could only stand there, looking at his son, looking at Sarah, and within him a small spark of hope began to grow. He didn't know what the future held, but at least he had taken the first step, and that was the most important thing. The next morning, the faint light of dawn filtered through the familiar house. Ethan sat at the dining table, feeling a strange warmth, being part of a family, though he knew things could never return to how they once were. Sarah was preparing breakfast, while Lucas sat silently beside him, his eyes constantly focused on Ethan. The boy was trying to understand the father he had never truly known. Ethan saw the expectation in Sarah and Lucas's eyes. He knew he couldn't disappoint them again. Every action of his now carried weight. Despite the worries gnawing at his heart, he couldn't let the shortcomings of the past haunt him forever. Breakfast passed in silence, with only gentle sounds filling the room. But inside, Ethan felt an immense tension. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to heal the wounds he had caused. But he knew everything had to start with the truth, with facing the mistakes he had made. In the afternoon, Sarah decided to go out to take care of some errands. She didn't say much, just looked at Ethan and spoke calmly. "I'll be gone for a bit. You stay with Lucas. Okay?" Ethan nodded, though anxiety filled his heart. As the door closed behind Sarah, the house felt quieter. He looked at Lucas, and for the first time he felt a distinct distance between them. Though he had tried to connect with his son, everything was a difficult starting point. Lucas sat on the sofa, engrossed in a cartoon on the TV. Ethan didn't dare approach, standing still from afar, his eyes fixed on the boy. He felt his heart break, realizing he had never been the father Lucas needed. After a long while, Lucas turned to look at Ethan, his gaze unchanged, full of curiosity, but also some unfamiliarity. "Do you want to play with me, Dad?" Lucas asked, his innocent voice full of longing. Ethan couldn't imagine the feeling of a child growing up without a father by his side. Lucas's clear eyes seemed to hold no judgment, only the simple desire for his father's presence, a presence Ethan had failed to give him for so many years. I really want to, Lucas," Ethan said, his voice choked. "I'm sorry. I know I've been wrong, but I promise from now on I'll always be here for you. We'll play together, do everything together. Okay?" Lucas didn't say anything, but nodded gently, and that made Ethan's heart break even more. He couldn't hold back his emotions, unable to fully grasp the pain in his heart as he looked at his son, the part of him he had missed for so long. When Sarah returned home, she saw this scene, Ethan and Lucas sitting together on the sofa, playing a simple game, but filled with laughter. In that moment, Sarah stood at the door, her eyes softening. She didn't know what to feel, but perhaps a part of her had realized something. A new opportunity, a new beginning for this family. "You did well, Ethan," Sarah said, walking in and placing her hand on his shoulder. Her words didn't need to be elaborate, but they were enough for him to feel her forgiveness. "Do you think you can do it?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle but full of hope. Ethan looked into Sarah's eyes, then at Lucas, laughing beside him. "I'll do everything to deserve this second chance, Sarah. I don't want to miss it again." Sarah remained silent for a long moment, then nodded softly. "We'll start again, Ethan. The three of us will try together." From then on, Ethan's life began to change. Each day, he tried to rebuild not just for himself, but for Lucas, for Sarah, for the family he had forgotten. And though things weren't always easy, moments like this, when he saw Lucas's eyes and Sarah's smile, told him that he had been given another chance. A chance to begin again, to love, and to prove that love and sacrifice were the strongest forces that could help a person overcome any difficulty. Ethan couldn't redo everything from the beginning, but at least he had found the strength to begin again from now. And in this moment, as he looked into his son's eyes, he knew the only thing he needed to do was never leave again. As days passed, Ethan gradually felt the changes within himself. Sarah had given him a chance to re-enter their lives, and that was not easy. But one thing Ethan knew for sure: he could no longer repeat his old mistakes. He had to be a better man, a father worthy of Lucas, and he had to prove to Sarah that she was right to give him a second chance. The first nights back at Sarah's house weren't easy. The space still carried the scars of the past. Long nights when everyone had fallen asleep, Ethan would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was strong enough to never disappoint them again. Though Sarah didn't speak it, he could see the lingering doubts in her eyes, doubts he couldn't erase immediately. One afternoon, when Sarah went out, Ethan decided to spend some time talking to Lucas. The boy was sitting in the living room, focused on drawing on a piece of paper. A light breeze from the window rustled the leaves outside, creating a soft, ancient melody. Ethan stepped into the room, standing for a moment, not wanting to disturb him. Lucas looked up, his big eyes looking at him with curiosity, but without any shyness. That made Ethan's heart tighten. The boy held no anger or resentment in his gaze, only innocence, and an unconscious desire to have his father present. "Can you draw with me, Dad?" Lucas asked, his sweet, pure voice with no demand, just a simple desire to connect, to be close. Ethan smiled, feeling like he was reliving moments he thought he had lost forever. He sat down next to Lucas, took a pencil and started drawing. At first, everything felt unfamiliar to him, sharing this space, this time with his son, something he had missed so much. Lucas looked at him with hopeful eyes, as if waiting for a promise. Ethan understood that with every line drawn, every gesture, he was slowly rebuilding a bridge that had long been broken. When Sarah returned, she saw this scene. Ethan and Lucas were sitting together, their hands drawing on a blank sheet of paper, simple lines, but filled with affection. Sarah stood silently at the door, watching. She knew everything wasn't entirely okay, but at least this was a good sign. As dinner was prepared, Sarah looked at Ethan once more, but this time her gaze held no doubt, no caution like before. "You did well," she said gently, though unable to hide her warm smile. Ethan felt a peace he had never known before. He knew this journey wouldn't be easy, but if he could do things like this for Lucas every day, then all the challenges ahead would be worth facing. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be a real father, the kind of father who's always there when his son needs him. The next day, when Ethan took Lucas to the park, the boy held his hand, walking beside him, as if they had been bonded for a long time. Sarah didn't go with them, giving them space to rebuild their relationship. Ethan felt something in his heart shifting. He was no longer the man of alcohol, of neglect. He was a father, and that was a role he needed to do well. As they sat on the grass, Lucas asked Will, "You stay with me forever?" "Dad," Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked into his son's eyes, and everything in his life seemed to slow down. The years he had missed, the precious moments he had lost, all seemed to converge in that simple question. "I'll always be here with you, Lucas. I promise," Ethan replied, his voice full of certainty. That was the first promise he made to his son since he returned, and this time he would never break that promise again. After that day, their lives began to stabilize. Ethan and Sarah didn't speak much about the past, but they both understood that they had started a new chapter. Though the wounds still existed in their hearts, at least they were trying to heal them. More importantly, Lucas now had his father by his side, a father he could trust. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but at least he had a new chance, a chance to rebuild his life, to become the father Lucas needed and the man Sarah could trust. And that was all he could do now, take each step steadily, even though many challenges lay ahead, but he would never give up. In the days that followed, Ethan slowly realized that change didn't come easily. Every day he had to fight not only against the temptation of alcohol, but also with the wounds in his soul. Every time he thought about the past, he felt unworthy of the chance he had been given. But it was the love and trust Sarah and Lucas placed in him that fueled his strength to continue. Ethan started attending meetings with people who had gone through similar hardships. One of the people who helped him immensely was Father Michael, a priest at Bethesda Mission, where he had gone to seek recovery. On his first day at Bethesda Mission, Ethan felt like an outsider, not knowing where to begin. The small room with its dim yellow lights and the men and women around him, each with their own story, all searching for salvation. Yet in the midst of these people, Ethan felt lonelier and more lost than ever. Father Michael noticed Ethan when he entered the room. He didn't say much, simply inviting him to sit next to him. The peaceful aura that Father Michael exuded made Ethan feel a little lighter. "Hello, Ethan. God is always with you, even when you think you're undeserving. Father Michael began with a warm voice. This journey isn't to change the past, but to save the future. You can't change what has happened, but you can make today and tomorrow better. Ethan remained silent, simply sitting and listening. He had never imagined that someone like him could find something good in a place like this. But with each word Father Michael spoke, it felt like a strong rope was pulling him out of the abyss he had fallen into by his own doing. In the weeks that followed, Ethan participated in group meetings, learning how to share his pain with others. At first he was reluctant, but then he realized that his silence wasn't helping anyone. It only deepened the loneliness inside. The people in the group didn't judge him, they just listened. And that was something Ethan had never experienced before. There were days when he felt he couldn't go on. But just thinking of Lucas, thinking of his son's smile, of the tight hug he had given him, gave him the strength to keep moving forward. He wanted to become the man his son needed, and to do that, he had to find himself again. A month later, Ethan decided to enroll in a long-term recovery program. It was a decision he couldn't put off any longer. He knew that if he didn't do it now, he would fall back into his old ways. But this time, he wasn't just doing it for himself. He was doing it for Sarah and Lucas. He wanted to be the man they could be proud of. On his first day at the recovery center, Ethan felt like he was starting over from scratch, not just physically, but mentally as well. He had to rebuild everything from the simplest things, learning how to control his emotions, facing the painful truths, and most importantly, learning to love himself. In the afternoons, when the members of the group sat together and shared their progress, Ethan gradually realized that he wasn't the only one trying to rebuild. Everyone around him had their own story, and each one held pain, loss, and hope. Father Michael always reminded him and the group that recovery wasn't a simple journey. It's like planting seeds and tending to them. They won't grow immediately, but if you're patient and care for them, one day you'll see the beautiful things grow from your resilience. Ethan thought about Father Michael's words, and he realized that each day of his life was an opportunity to start again. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could change what was to come. With Father Michael's guidance and the support of the recovery group, Ethan began to rebuild his life. Every step, even the small ones, was a victory. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be a better man, a responsible man, a real father to Lucas. One morning, after completing a week in the program, Ethan received a call from Sarah. She said that Lucas was eagerly waiting for him to come home and play with him. Looking at the phone, Ethan felt joy welling up inside him. This was the time to go back, not just to Sarah, but to himself. Ethan picked up the phone, pressed the call button, and softly said, "I'll come home, Sarah. I'll be the father Lucas needs." And this time, he knew he would never give up again. Ethan had come a long way, from the long nights filled with guilt to the bright mornings filled with new hope. His days at Bethesda Mission had helped him rediscover a part of himself, and though the road to recovery was still long, every step he took brought him closer to his goal to be a true father to Lucas, the man Sarah could trust, and most importantly, to return to himself. A month later, as his recovery program at Bethesda Mission was coming to an end, Ethan felt a surge of mixed emotions. He didn't know where he would go after the program ended, but one thing he was sure of: he was no longer the lost man he once was. He had learned to control his emotions, to face the pains that had caused him to lose so much in life. Every morning, Ethan woke up feeling different. He felt a peace he had never known before, a peace he could only find by letting go of old habits, by abandoning the bottles of alcohol that had haunted him for so long. He no longer feared facing himself. Instead, there was a small but powerful confidence. That day, as Ethan walked out of the recovery center and returned home, he felt like he was stepping into a new world. Everything around him was the same, but he was different. Sarah greeted him at the door with a gentle smile. Although her eyes still held traces of worry, there was also hope in them that she had placed in him. "Welcome back," Sarah said, her voice warm but still cautious. She looked into Ethan's eyes as if searching for something she hadn't seen in a long time. "Are you okay?" Ethan nodded. "I'm okay. I've made it, Sarah. I've learned to face myself." After dinner, when Lucas ran into the room, his eyes lit up when he saw Ethan. The boy still didn't fully understand everything, but he could sense the difference. Lucas ran up and hugged Ethan, and this time Ethan didn't hesitate to embrace him, no longer feeling guilt, but only true love. "Dad, will you stay with me forever?" Lucas asked, his innocent eyes looking up at Ethan as if that was the only thing he needed right now. Ethan took his son's hand, feeling the warmth of the little hand. He bent down, looked into Lucas's eyes, and with deep conviction he said, "I'll always be here with you, Lucas. I promise. I'll be the dad you deserve." Sarah stood at the door, watching them, feeling the love Ethan had for their son. She knew that although the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, at least today, Ethan had become the man she had always hoped for. After that, Ethan began a new job. A job that not only helped him make a living, but also made him feel valued. He started participating in community activities, supporting those going through difficulties just like he once did. He knew that recovery wasn't a destination, but a journey, and he had begun that journey. In the days that followed, as Lucas grew older, every moment with him was a precious reward that Ethan cherished deeply. Every time Lucas called him Dad, every time the boy needed him for something small, Ethan felt a simple yet profound happiness. He didn't need to do anything special. Just being present in his son's life was enough. But it wasn't just Lucas. Sarah also began to open up to him. The long conversations after dinner the afternoon, walks together, sharing about the past and future plans, those moments gradually helped them reconnect in a way they had lost. "You've done really well," Ethan, Sarah said. One evening when she and he sat together in the dim light. "I don't know where I'd be without you. We've been through so much together, and now I feel like everything is slowly falling back into place." Ethan simply smiled, not needing to say more. He knew that things wouldn't be perfect right away, but he also knew one thing for sure: he would never give up again. He had found himself, and now he had a family to love and protect. And on a morning when Ethan looked out the window, he saw Lucas playing in the yard, laughing with friends. He felt happiness fill his heart. Life was no longer a series of blurred days full of mistakes and regrets. It was now a journey of recovery, love, and second chances. Ethan didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing: he was ready to face every challenge ahead because he had the most important things in life: family and love. As time passed, Ethan began to feel a noticeable change in his life. He was no longer the man lost in alcohol, avoiding the challenges of life. But even though he had overcome the biggest trials, he still felt an emptiness in his heart, a lingering pain he hadn't faced yet. It was the memories of the past, the wounds he had inflicted on himself and those he loved. One morning, as Ethan woke up, he saw the old pictures hanging on the wall. One photo of Sarah and him, both young, holding hands on the beach, their eyes full of happiness. Another photo of Lucas when he was a baby, his big eyes staring into the camera with untainted innocence. Ethan silently sat down next to the desk, his hand gripping the photos tightly. The memories of days gone by rose like a wave, sweeping away all the joy and hope he once had. He remembered those days, the long, sleepless nights, the guilt, the fear of facing Sarah, and most of all, the abandonment of Lucas. He had hurt them. He had left them to face challenges that he should have shared. The question still lingered in his mind: is it possible to make it right? On the weekend, Sarah had a deep conversation with Ethan about his past. "You think about the mistakes you've made a lot, don't you?" Sarah gently asked as they sat together in the living room. "I know you've struggled with them, but you've changed, Ethan. You've walked through the worst of it and are rebuilding this life. You need to learn to forgive yourself." Ethan lowered his head, his voice choking. "But how can I forgive myself, Sarah? How can I forget what I've done to you and Lucas?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment without answering right away. She could feel the torment in Ethan's words, the pain he hadn't let go of. You have to face those memories, not to forget them, but to accept them and learn from them. You can't change what happened, but you can change how you see them and move forward. Ethan looked up, his eyes red from sleepless nights. "What do I have to do to forgive myself?" "You don't need to do anything grand," Ethan Sarah said softly. "Just keep doing what you've been doing. You're doing well. You're the father. Lucas needs the man I can trust. We're both learning to start over, and most importantly, we're doing it together." Sarah's words made Ethan slowly realize that forgiveness didn't come easily. It was a journey, a never-ending process. He knew he had to continue facing himself, to look at the past without letting it drag him down, and most importantly, to keep loving himself. The next day, Ethan attended a support meeting at the recovery center, where he met others with similar stories. This time, when he stood up to share his story, he no longer felt fear. He didn't feel weak or useless anymore. He was just a man who had made mistakes, but he had been given a second chance to make things right. Hello, my name is Ethan, and I was once an alcoholic. He began, his voice no longer trembling, but full of resolve. I've missed many years of my life. I abandoned my family and my son. But today, I'm here because I know I can change. I haven't given up, and I will never give up. The people in the group looked at him with warm eyes, and in that moment, Ethan felt acceptance. They didn't judge him, didn't see him as a failure. They saw in him resilience, a desire to start over. That evening, when Ethan returned home, he felt lighter than he had in a long time. He sat down with Sarah and Lucas, sharing a simple dinner. Lucas didn't say much, but his eyes looked at Ethan with unconditional trust. Ethan set down his chopsticks, looked into Sarah's eyes, and for the first time in many years, he felt true peace in his heart. "Thank you," he said to Sarah. "Thank you for giving me this chance, the chance to start over." Sarah smiled, holding his hand. "No need to thank me, Ethan. I just need you here, and I know we'll get through everything together." As the night fell and everyone drifted off to sleep, Ethan lay thinking about everything he had gone through. He knew the road to recovery didn't end here, but at least he had taken another step. He had learned to face the past, learned to love himself, and most importantly, he knew he wasn't alone in this journey. And this time, as he closed his eyes, he no longer felt afraid. He knew that the future, no matter how difficult, would be built on the steady steps he had started today. Spring had arrived for Ethan and his family. The first rays of sunlight for the year poured through the window, brightening the old house that he once thought he would never return to. The new leaves sprouted from the branches, flowers bloomed, and a new season began. An entirely new journey lay ahead of him. Ethan stood by the window, gazing out at the garden where Lucas was playing with the neighborhood kids. The boy was running around laughing, and Ethan couldn't take his eyes off of him. He remembered the dark days, the days he had missed all these precious moments. Now he saw the peace, the completeness he had always longed for. He needed nothing more than to be with his family, to be the father Lucas could be proud of. One evening after dinner, the family gathered together in the living room. Sarah sat across from Ethan, smiling, her eyes full of tenderness and love. Lucas was being mischievous beside them, occasionally looking at his parents, then returning to his playful activities. "You've done really well, Ethan." Sarah began, her voice gentle but full of pride. "I never thought we'd have a day like today, but I know one thing. I was right to believe in you." Ethan felt a surge of emotion rise in his chest. He didn't say anything, just looked at Sarah, then at Lucas. Words couldn't describe all he felt. He smiled, took Sarah's hand, as if trying to convey all the deep feelings that words could not express. "You're a strong woman," Ethan whispered. "Without you, I wouldn't have been able to do all of this. I just want to thank you for giving me this chance, the chance to start over." Sarah didn't reply immediately. She just looked at him and nodded, as if she understood everything he was trying to say. She reached for his hand and spoke simply but with deep meaning, "We'll continue this journey together." The weeks passed, and Ethan's life slowly fell into a peaceful rhythm. He began working harder not just for himself, but for his family. Sarah returned to work, but she no longer had the worries she once had. They no longer had those tense nights or arguments. Lucas was still the mischievous child, but he was becoming more open and comfortable with the presence of his father. Some afternoons, Ethan and Lucas went fishing together, an activity he had promised to do with his son for a long time. Every time they caught a fish, Lucas would cheer with joy, and Ethan would laugh with him, feeling the happiness in those simple moments. A month later, on a weekend day, when the whole family was sitting together in the garden, Sarah picked up the camera and took a picture of Ethan and Lucas. That simple scene, a father holding his son in his arms, the two of them watching the sunset together, became a symbol of a new beginning. Not a distant dream, but the simple, loving moments they had found again. "Dad, I love you," Lucas said, turning to look at Ethan with shining eyes. That simple phrase was a confirmation that despite everything that had once fallen apart, they had now rebuilt it. And that was all Ethan needed. Ethan smiled his eyes, looking at Lucas, then at Sarah, feeling the warmth in his heart. He didn't need to search for anything more because he had it all: family love and the chance to start over. On another evening, when Lucas had fallen asleep, Sarah sat beside Ethan, their hands intertwined. "You know, Ethan," Sarah said softly, "I've never seen you like this. You haven't just rebuilt your life, you've rebuilt ours." Ethan looked into Sarah's eyes, not needing to say much. He just smiled, feeling the happiness of having her by his side. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll always love you and Lucas." Their life wasn't perfect, but in Ethan's eyes, it was a happy story, a story he had fought long and hard to rewrite. But now he knew the journey never truly ends. Life is a series of continuous steps, and he would always walk those steps with the people he loved.